guys. Recently I came across this new microphone by Shure. It's called the Shure SM7dB. The Shure SM7dB is a Shure SM7B with basically a cloud lifter inside of it, which gives you some clean gain, phantom powered clean gain. Basically, the Shure SM7B has been known to need a ton of gain from the preamp. It needs 59 decibels of gain. The Shure SM7dB sensitivity can either be 59 decibels of gain, 41 decibels of gain, or 31 decibels of gain. Once you start to get into the 30s, that's the equivalent sensitivity of a lot of condenser microphones. So basically the preamp only needs as much gain as you would need with a super sensitive condenser microphone like the ones I'm using right now. The problem with this is there's a theoretical EIN limit to the noise floor of preamps. So again, dynamic microphones need a lot of gain, and lately a lot of companies have been coming out with these devices like the cloud lifter that is designed to take the stress off of your preamp and provide up to 25 decibels of ultra clean gain. The problem with this is, so you can use it on like dynamic ribbon and tube mics. The problem with this is, again, what is EIN? EIN is the preamp manufacturers know they are more or less starting at this theoretical noise limit of negative 129.6 dBu. So the value they can quote is equivalent input noise in their specs. EIN basically takes this source noise into account. Therefore, the theoretical lowest EIN spec you could encounter with preamps is negative 129.6 dBu. So these gain boosters actually boost that theoretical noise limit along with that so-called clean gain. So this thing is kind of a scam, and it works best with low-end preamps that if you crank the gain, like it'll color the sound, like it'll roll off the highs or the lows, stuff like that. And this is here to help leverage those crappy preamps that will color the sound when you max out the preamp gain. And in some cases, they can lower the noise floor of the preamp. But in most cases, we look here, the preamp equivalent input noise on the SM7dB is negative 130 dBV. Okay? That means that this SM7dB, again, if you see anything higher than like negative 130, negative 131 dBV for the equivalent input noise, it's a scam. This is like the theoretical limit that a preamp can be. And these gain boosters do not hack that theoretical limit. So when you're juicing up the SM7B by its, sensitivity of negative 60 dB, you can be using a cloud lifter. You can be using other gain boosters. You're not going to be able to, breach this theoretical limit. Basically what I'm saying is there's a lot of preamps, like we can see here, that, all of these preamps in blue and green, mainly these preamps, if you buy one of these, it's better than the cloud lifter. So you could buy an Audient ID24. You could buy a solid state Logic SSL2. This thing right here, the solid state SSL2 is only $250. Okay? It's $250 for, ultra low self noise preamp. If you buy the solid state Logic for $250, there is absolutely no need, there is absolutely no need to invest in the SM7dB, which is $500. So you're paying an additional $100 from the SM7B to get this, built-in preamp. You're paying $100 for the built-in preamp when you could buy quite a few preamps, audio interfaces, that have a lower EIN than, the Cloud Lifter built into the SM7dB. Now again, what is self noise? If we look here, you want a good self noise figure for your microphone and your preamp. The microphones I use have extremely low self noise. Okay, anything below 10 dBA, extremely low noise, is extremely low noise. The exact figure is unimportant, as even a very quiet recording room will contribute quite a bit more ambient noise than 10 dBA. Typically, extremely low self-noise figures are only found in modern-day large diaphragm condenser mics, such as the Neumann TL103, which is what I'm using right here, the Neumann TL103. Okay, it's ultra-low self-noise. And once you get higher self-noise figures, like 24 dBA self-noise and above, such self-noise figures are usually unworthy of a studio microphone. So I prefer ultra-low self-noise, which is like 10 dBA or better, because you will never hear an audible hiss. 16 to 19 dBA is a good enough for most purposes. You may hear some noise when you record relatively quiet instruments, but it's usually unobtrusive, so it just gets worse and worse. And they even have a spot for dynamic microphones. Self-noise is rarely specified for dynamic microphones. That's because their noise performance is largely dependent on the microphone preamp used. As a rule of thumb, dynamic microphones on an ultra-low noise preamp reach self-noise figures of about 18 dBA. So in this ballpark, if you have a Shure SM7B and a Cloud Lifter attached to an extremely good preamp, you're going to have a theoretical limit of about negative 130 dBV, and that is going to result in a 16 to 19 dBA limit. This is good enough for most purposes. You may hear some noise when you record relatively quiet instruments, but it's usually unobtrusive. This is the best you're going to get. And again, just because you get this built-in preamp, you have to remember, if you're using a really crappy, noisy preamp, this gain booster is actually going to boost the noise floor along with that 25 dBs of clean gain. Because if you have a noisy preamp, it's going to be amplified when you go through this gain booster. It's hard to explain, but you're better off getting one of these ultra low noise preamps from these audio interfaces in blue up here. It's a much better idea to get one of these and a normal SM7B, and you will actually have lower self noise than the SM7dB. So instead of spending an additional $100 for the SM7dB, that can be spent towards one of these ultra quiet preamp audio interfaces. So again, the solid state Logic SSL2 is $250. If you have a normal SM7B at $399, then investing another $100 on the SM7dB, then the solid state Logic will only cost you $150 with that $100 conversion. So you can only you spend $150 for a solid state Logic SSL2 and an SM7B, and you will have slightly lower self noise than using the built-in Cloud Lifter on the SM7dB built-in preamp. Now I know what you're thinking. What if I have a bunch of other audio interfaces with higher preamp noise, like all these ones in green? Again, a lot of times I've noticed with these gain boosters is it boosts the noisy preamp along with that 25 decibels of clean gain, so-called clean gain, and you're going to still hear an audible hiss. The best thing to do is to get a low noise preamp audio interface and the SM7B. These built-in preamps, at most, it's going to help with crappier audio interfaces, like some of them at high gain. I don't know if I can find this. See the mic input here? See how it's rolling off the high frequencies?
Under real-world conditions, because dynamic microphones mostly have a roll-off at higher frequencies as well. But in an A-B comparison, this is definitely audible, leaving you with a tad less openness. When you use less gain, which is very common with condenser microphones, then the frequency response is actually much better, being nearly completely flat in the audible range. No complaints here.
So that is an example of, if you use max gain on a lot of preamps, it'll do things like roll off the high frequencies. So, if you're max gaining your preamp, it'll roll off the highs, okay? And if you had the cloud lifter built in, you wouldn't need, 63 decibels of gain and it would flatten out. You would only need, this is at 32 decibels of gain. Okay, and it's completely flat. So, this is good. This is a case where, one of these cloud lifters, where you would only need 31 decibels of gain, would improve the treble extension on the SM7B when using a crappy budget preamp that rolls off the highs or the lows or whatever when you crank the gain. So again, if you know all these things, you could just buy a really good preamp that doesn't roll off the highs or any of this weird crap, like a solid state Logic SSL2, and then you wouldn't need, the SM7dB. So is this a good product? In certain cases, it may get the noise floor down a couple of decibels. It may improve the sound quality by not stressing the preamp being used in your audio interface. But if you know exactly what you're getting when it comes to a preamp and it can handle max gain and it has a good EIN, then the SM7B is actually a better product, and you're wasting $100 because using the built-in preamp will actually raise the noise floor by 1 or 2 decibels, believe it or not, in a lot of cases. And that's somewhere, you can watch one of his videos where he talks about, do you need a cloud lifter? It's somewhere around here. It could be really, really low in these videos. Do you really need a cloud lifter?
Do you really need a fathead? Or below, I would consider ultra low noise. If that's the case, your preamps in the recording device are already good enough, and there is going to be hardly any reduction in noise when using an additional inline preamp. In that case, you probably don't need a fathead or cloud lifter. Let's say your preamps are not ultra low noise. So the next question is, do you record loud stuff? Loud would be things like a close-up drums or an interview with a jet engine. If that's the case, you probably don't need a fathead or cloud lifter. Okay, let's say you record lower level audio things like dialogue. Then you would jump into the last question. Do you use a microphone with a high sensitivity? Dynamic mics with about -50 dBV or 3 millivolts at 1 Pascal I consider to be high sensitivity. So if you use something like a Behringer XM8500, then you already guessed it, you probably don't need a fathead or cloud lifter. On the other hand, if you use something like a Shure SM7B with its notoriously low sensitivity of -59 dBV or about 1 millivolts at 1 Pascal, then it's pretty likely that you need a fathead or cloud lifter. Of course, there are an endless combinations of different recording devices, mics and recording situations out there, and this flowchart cannot accommodate every single situation. but it can give you a pretty good idea if an inline preamp might be useful or not. One thing is for sure though, if nobody hears any noise in your recordings, you probably don't need a... Okay, I think you know it by now. I hope you understand that the answer to the question whether you need an inline preamp or not is not a simple yes or no answer. Like with many things in life, it depends. I hope...
So yeah, you could just go ahead and get a mic preamp like this on the solid state SSL2 for $250 that has a mic preamp EIN of negative 130.5 dBu with a gain range of 62 decibels, which can power a Shure SM7B without a cloud lifter. So, you know, buy one of these things or many other audio interfaces and you won't need the SM7dB. I got hyped up about this thing. I bought the SM7B a couple of times. I think it's nasally, it's dark. You know, if we look at the SM7B frequency response, you know, it's got this treble peak right here and then it cuts down like that. So that's actually really annoying and bad. The treble on this thing is actually really bad, which is the reason why I don't like the SM7B. I would prefer it to have a treble bubble like that. So this frequency response is really good. It's only this spot right here that really screws up the SM7B. This treble cut. It gets rid of you know, a lot of sibilance, but it also sounds really funky because it gives you this lump right here. So you have this lump and this resulting dip and the frequency response, and this sounds really bad. You know, it's supposed to look like this. Okay, so we have this huge cut in the treble, which makes it sound dark and get rid of a lot of sibilance. But it also, you know, I just don't like the tone of it, especially because it has this lump right here, you know, and then it cuts down. It's just funky in the treble, and I don't like it. So, you know, I don't like the SM7B. I never did. I think it sounds too dark. It sounds funky in the treble. It sounds chewed up, which also makes it sound nasally and stuffy. Anyway, you know, and it's audibly hissy. But again, the reason why people do like it is it is actually really neutral in the mids. Like this entire region is really transparent and natural sounding. It's just the treble sounds all screwed up, and I don't like that. You can do better. Anyway,